Hello everyone, welcome to the Old Man and the Read. My name is Jerry. Today I'm going to discuss the books I've read by another one of my favorite writers. That's Jim Crace. Jim Crace is an English novelist and short story writer who was born in 1946. He's just an exceptional writer, wrote beautiful prose, but he also wrote very unique and original stories, very unusual and but just really entertaining stories. He's received some recognition by like the Booker Prize and some of the others, but not a lot of recognition, but so I think he's one of those that just hasn't received the recognition that his outstanding writing deserves. But then again, there's several of those types of writers. So I'll show the books I've read and try to say a little bit about them. The first book he published that I have is Continent, and this was published in 1986. This is a collection of 7 short stories that all take place in an imaginary continent. Crace describes the people, their beliefs and superstitions, and a little bit about their culture, but all from his imagination. The next book he published that I have is The Gift of Stones, published in 1988. And this story takes place during the Stone Age. It's about a man who lost an arm in an aero accident when he was a boy. He lives... The village he's from is a village of craftsmen who make tools from flint. But because he lost his arm, he's unable to pursue that occupation, and so he becomes a spinner of tales. Crace wrote this in just very lyrical prose and mimicked the tales that the man would tell, combining fact with fiction. The next book is Arcadia, published in 1992, and this follows a man named Victor who's a millionaire living in a penthouse in his in a skyscraper that he owns. He's about to turn 80, and he grew up in extreme poverty and was completely self-made and just made his own fortune. But for his 80th birthday, he's decided that he's going to close a market that he owns, and at the same time has decided he's going to fire his right-hand man, Rook. Now this decision proves to be a little disastrous for him. Rook decides to take revenge, and a lot of conflicts then follow. In 1994, he published Signals of Distress, and this takes place in the year 1836, and it's about an American ship that runs aground near a small English village. This sets loose just a bunch of unruly crewmen on the town, and as well as an African slave from the ship, and it unleashes them on the citizens of the village. The story is narrated by Amer Smith, and he details the consequences of this event. In 1997, he published Quarantine, and this follows 4 pilgrims who are traveling into the Judean desert, and they're followed by a 5th man who happens to be Jesus. They are going into the desert for 40 days of quarantine. They each choose a cave, and they spend their time in there fasting and looking for enlightenment and purification. It's a very alternate story of Jesus, and although it's completely fictional, to me this seemed like a much more realistic story than the traditional one we're told. In 1999, he published Being Dead, and this is just really an exceptional, very unique story. It's about an older married couple that have been brutally murdered. They had been making love in a isolated sand dune far away from everything, and it's told in 2 narratives, actually. The first one talks about the years and the hours leading up to their death, and then the other talks about the days after the occasion, and Crace describes the decaying process in a very scientific way. And I should mention the couple that were killed were both zoologists who actually studied the creatures that then later devoured them. In the year 2001, he published The Devils Larder, and this is another collection of short stories, and they're all revolve around food and things related to food. They're all extremely short, very short, and I think the longest isn't any more than about 5 or 6 pages, but just another really great book by Crace. In 2003, Genesis was published, and this is actually, I think, the American version of a book that had been published titled 6 earlier in his career. But it's a very extremely well written book, and at times rather funny, but I didn't think it was as good as some of his other books. This follows a man named Lix Dern, who's a singer and an actor, and it's mostly about his sexual encounters. His problem is that each of the women that he has the sexual encounters with then ends up being pregnant. In the year 2007, he published The Pest House, and this is a story set in the far future in America, and it's about a man who starts traveling east, and he meets up with a woman who's quite ill, and they start traveling together. But they're traveling across this very devastated land. It's the only remnants are steel structures still coming up from the ground, but they're heading east, and they are going there because they've heard that they can get on a ship and that can take them to Europe, where they'll have a better life. In the year 2010, he published All That Follows, and this follows a man named Leonard Lessing, and he's a jazz saxophone player who's living in England. He is in a, has a life that's okay. He's got a fairly good marriage, and but then he happens to see in the news a story about a man who had been an acquaintance of his when he lived in Austin, and this man is holding people hostage. So he has to decide, is he going to sit by just idly watching this, or is he going to get involved? In the year 2013, he published Harvest. This takes place in a very tiny, remote, medieval English village, and it's about the village turning from its very quiet existence into mayhem after the arrival of 3 strangers and then a new master. In the year 2018, he published Melody. This is a story about a man named Alfred Bussey. He's a retired musician, and he's been dealing with the passing of his wife that occurred 2 years before, having a difficult time adjusting to it. But then one night he's mysteriously attacked by an unknown creature, and this attack sets off a series of events that completely alter his life. And the last book I have by Jim Crace is Eden. This was published in 2022, and this is set in Eden several years after Adam and Eve have been expelled. But it's Eden is depicted as a vast garden surrounded by an extremely high wall that's impenetrable, and Eden is inhabited by very subservient humans who are being ruled by blue feathered angels with beaks, and Eden is a place that death does not exist, where death does not exist. Or outside of the walls of Eden is the normal world where the normal humans live, and it's a place of death and misery. But not everybody in Eden is happy, and some have a desire to see the outside world. And so the story follows a woman named Tabby who escapes from Eden to see the world, and this sets off a whole series of events that prove disastrous to Eden. But those are the books I've read by Jim Crace, an exceptional writer, very unique stories, some just very imaginative, and just a great writer. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on another video. Thanks.